Here is the 2022 Focarini Ultra.
What's that?
Well, that's a 29er bike with 140mm suspension and
That sounds a bit like the Orbea Rise.
yeah, I don't know, it's a bit heavier and probably a more powerful motor too.
Okay, so it's more like a full-fat, full-power EMTB then?
No, it's got a less powerful motor and it's got a smaller 500 watt-hours battery.
So it's more like an older bike with a Shimano E-8000 motor then?
Well, I don't know, perhaps. Let's find out. Take a look at this bike. It's looking like sort of agricultural. It's looking a bit old school. It's not a single curved tube. Not like pretty much every carbon bike and a lot of the new aluminium frame bikes. There is just straight tube, no curves. So it's looking kind of old school, and that's not necessarily a bad thing. That's up to you to decide. The Focarini Ultra comes with a SRAM 11-speed NX drivetrain. It comes with a 500 watt-hours battery. It comes with some fairly nice formula brakes. The Formula Cura, a single piston caliper, which, often we prefer the dual caliper brakes, but on this kind of bike, I'm not really sure it makes much of a difference. So it's 140mm travel, relatively short stroke rear suspension, 140mm travel fork, and the fork is the RockShox 35 Silver. We often talked about the RockShox 35 Gold being sort of the minimum quality you want on a fork, is sort of like an entry-level capable trail fork. So we were excited to see how the silver version would hold up. And we're not totally impressed, but still it's a functioning fork at least. Riding this bike feels quite different to most of the bikes we've been riding. And it's not just the 140mm travel cheaper fork, and it's not just the jump tray. The Norwegian distributor claims 65 degrees head angle, and the manufacturer, Focarini, they doesn't seem to claim anything. I can't find any jump tray data on this bike. So I tried measuring the jump tray myself, and this really isn't that accurate at all, but I got about 481mm of chainstay length, which is fairly long, and the wheelbase was like 1221, 1222, which really isn't a long wheelbase at all, considering this is the biggest frame in the lineup, the size 47 frame. So I'm not really sure the head angle actually is 65 degrees. Based on the relatively short wheelbase, it seems the head angle probably is a bit steeper. So I tried measuring that as well, and this is an even less accurate way of measuring, but I got around 66 degrees, perhaps just a tad under, but I'm thinking 66 sounds reasonable. So a 66 degrees head angle along with the 140mm travel fork, that keeps the wheelbase relatively short. As I mentioned, this is the biggest Focarini frame, the size 47. There's also a size 44. And the size really is fine for me at 181 centimeters, which makes me think it's a tad small for someone at like 190 centimeters. So Focarini mounted what I believe is a 70mm stem, and along with a 74 centimeters handlebar, you get a sort of unusually narrow grip and a forward position. This really makes the bike handle quite differently to what we're used to. But I guess they decided to do it this way for a couple of reasons. They wanted bigger riders to fit this relatively compact frame, and also I believe this bike really isn't designed to be the heavy hitter descender that most of the bikes we ride actually are. This is more of a upright seating position. It's a lot of rise on the stem, so you can have 30 millimeters of spacers behind the stem, so you get a really tall handlebar position. So this makes for a comfortable touring forest bike for people much taller than I am. And we did that kind of riding, and yeah, we can't fault the bike in any way really for that kind of riding. But taking it to the trails, we really missed the wider handlebars and a shorter stem, and the dropper post is only 100 millimeters, and the dropper post is pushed as far into the frame as it will go. It's probably blocked down here somewhere. So even though we would prefer more travel on the dropper post, I'm not really sure I could utilize it because I'm not getting the seat post deeper in the frame. But trail riding, it's what it's all about to us. And yeah, the fork. It's like 5 or 6 clicks of rebound adjustment, and like the 3 first clicks, I'm not really sure they did anything, and the 2 last clicks, they were very wide. So 1 click, the front end is very comfortable, but too loose, and you lose the front end at chatter, high speed turns, and so on. So adding another click, and it settles down, but the front end is a bit saggy and heavy to lift. Combined with a long rear end, it can be a bit of work getting the front wheel up. So with this long stem and this fork that doesn't really settle down all that well, it feels a bit unsafe on these dry, loose conditions that we currently have here. The bike is not giving us a lot of confidence, and it's not a blast on the flatter trails. It could be more nimble, could be easier to handle and throw around. But going uphill, it really, really surprised us. Sure, the long rear end helps a lot. We could just stay seated on the saddle wherever, as far back as we wanted, and we'll never have any issues. And the motor was really pushing. The 75 Newton meters Polini motor, the E-P3, it's the weaker of the 2 EMTB motors by Polini. They also got the 90 Newton meters motor. But this didn't really feel like a weak motor at all. It engages quite nicely, not too violently, perhaps a bit conservatively. You have to move the bike a tiny bit before the motor kicks in, and you won't get maximum power when you start pedaling. And I'm not really sure if that's how the motor is programmed, or if we are really feeling the limitations of the 75 Newton meters when we start in a steep hill, for instance. But once we get going, the bike picks up speed nicely, and it amplifies our power input really well. So every hill is a blast, really. Going up this steep hill, the motor was giving us a lot of power, and I was sort of losing the front end in the turns between the trees, and yeah, the fork wasn't keeping up even going uphill. And there is another big advantage with this bike. The motor can be serviced to some degree by the end user, by the owner, and also it can be serviced by the local service center. So yeah, it's really a motor that's been built to last and to be kept alive, really, which can't be said about a lot of current EMTB motors. And I can't stress that enough. Having a motor that's been built to last, it's a big deal. It's a great reason for choosing this kind of bike. we will soon publish a review of this motor when we talk more about it and when we compare it to like the Bosch Performance CX and also the Shimano EP8 RS. And yeah, we are really surprised about this motor. So make sure you subscribe so you don't miss that video. The battery, 500 watt hours. And every bike in the Focarini lineup is 500 watt hours. But looking at the other bikes using the Polini motor, it seems there is a 711 watt hours, I believe, battery available. So if you want this motor system, then bigger batteries, more range is available. What I usually say about smaller batteries is that they've got their advantages. They are smaller, so easier to integrate, they're more lightweight, and they're cheaper. The manufacturer claims 22 kilos. So looking at this bike, a motor with a slightly lower rated power and a shorter suspension travel, it made me think, could this be like not a super lightweight bike, but a semi-lightweight bike, like the Orbea Rise Alloy? But that is not the case. This bike is just under 23.5 kilos. And then there's the price, 5,690 euros. That doesn't really seem all that cheap to me, but the way things are going in pretty much every market, prices are skyrocketing. I don't know, this might very well be a reasonably priced bike. You might have issues finding anything else at this price point. So check out the price and compare it to whatever else is available before deciding whether this is a good price or not. And it's not just the motor we are happy with this bike. For some reason, Focarini decided they want to put a bit of cash into the wheels. The Fulcrum E-Metal 700. And yeah, that could be a bit strange, I think, because I would prefer having better suspension and just have average wheels. But I think it makes sense, sort of. This bike could be used by bigger, heavier riders that are just doing recreation and not downhill stupidity. And having solid wheels makes sense. The forks, they are 35 millimeters, they're rigid. Yeah, I'm pretty sure this is a solid bike. We haven't managed to put a dent in it, at least. So we started this video by asking, what is this bike? Is it the Orbea Rise semi-super lightweight bike, or is it like a full power EMTB, or is it just like sort of a older bike, comparing it to like a 500 watt hours bike with a Shimano E1000? And it's really difficult to say, because it definitely is not the Orbea semi-lightweight bike. It's actually, in our tests, more powerful than the Bosch powered Trek Rail, and way more powerful than the older E8000 bike. But it sort of looks a bit like this, the Gecko it's called, it's a Norwegian brand. It's somewhat steeper head angle, less travel, 500 watt hours battery, sort of comparable, but riding them, this is a much more powerful bike. So I guess it's a comfortable, capable, powerful bike, really, not made for aggressive trail riding.